They did have that discussion of theology. Buxton did give him the leave to come back to Tennessee, about 10 days, and he spent a few of those days up there in those hills, consulting the Bible, and coming to the conclusion that it was okay for him to go to war, Alvin that is, and to fight for the United States, that it would not impede on the commandment of thou shalt not kill. Of course, Major Buxton was pretty convincing with render unto Caesar that which is Caesar and render unto God that which is God's. I mention all of this because that's kind of the theme of my tour. I like mentioning, Alvin as what a lot of people consider him this one-dimensional hero. He was way more complicated than a one-dimensional hero. He had his own life, he had his own virtues, he had his own values, he had his own faults to a degree. Much like you, much like me, much like you, George. Although you actually did challenge George Foreman, I believe that. I believe it, 100%. I promise. I just love that, it's a fun detail. So that's kind of going to be the theme as we go through the house. Also, if you have any questions as we're going through the house, normally with a large group I'd say raise your hands, but I think we're all controlled enough that if you have a question you can look at me and say, Will, shut up, I have a question. I will get to you as soon as possible. Any questions though right now, folks? On that note, we'll go into the house. So, welcome to the side porch, folks. Originally this space was not walled in like it is now. This was originally an outdoor area where the kids could enjoy and play and whatnot, but they walled it in to have a more climate-controlled area for things like drying bouquets, which was one of Gracie's hobbies, if you will. And Gracie, by the way, was Alvin's wife. They had met before Alvin had left for the war in about 1914, 1915. And the first thing Alvin does when he comes back from the war and is here in Tennessee, this is while he's in Tennessee, by the way, he comes back in April, but he makes it back to Tennessee in June of 1919, is he marries Gracie Williams. Indeed, one of his friends would come up to him right when he comes back and says, Alvin, do you want to go hunting this weekend? And he says, well, first I need to go hunting Miss Gracie. And to his credit, he does. But when he comes back from the war, the first thing that Alvin notices is he's famous. So, of course, October the 8th, 1918, as depicted by this portrait that we have here on the wall, Alvin kills between 20 and 25 Germans, depending on which report you're looking at. The number seems to be around 25, and captures 132, along with his squad of 8 men. It had originally been 20, but about 12 had been either killed or wounded in the engagement. And that is kind of a weird thing in the Army. October 8th, all of this happens. Can you imagine what his commanders think of it? Not a whole heck of a lot initially. It's just in the middle of the war. It's the waning days of the First World War. No one thinks too much about it. In fact, a few days later, Alvin is back on the front lines and he's almost blown up by a grenade. So he was almost taken from the world just after he committed that big action. It's only in November when a journalist, always a journalist stirring up this kind of muck, comes over to France, a guy named George Petullo. He's looking for a good story to sell back stateside. And he hears about Alvin, who was this conscientious objector before the war, this deeply religious man, again, adhered to the commandment, thou shalt not kill, who is convinced to come to fight for the country. He is also an elder in his local church, so again, very religious fellow, who kills 25 Germans and takes another 132 captive. It's a huge story for him. So he writes about it, titles the article, Second Elder Gives Fight, and it's published in the Saturday Evening Post toward the end of 1918. Alvin hears none of this. He has no idea that back home he is becoming famous. And he only finds out in April 1919 when he gets off of the boat in New York, where they greet him with a ticker tape parade. As he's saying, man. Oh, I thought someone was saying something. I apologize. If I call someone out for saying something, by the way, that's literally, I am losing my hearing. But he's in the middle of this ticker tape parade. He asks someone who they're having this ticker tape parade for. He doesn't know it's for him. And then one gentleman has to look at him and says, this is for you, Alvin. He's just taken back by the fame. He also communicates with Woodrow Wilson while he's in New York, meets all of these famous politicians. And again, he's struggling with what to do with the fame. So when he comes back to Tennessee, he's also hounded with offers to do movies, do books about his experience. In fact, one movie offer is $500,000 for him to tell his story. He would get $500,000 in 1919 currency. Anyone wager a guess how much that would be in today's money? $7 million. And he turns it down. He wants nothing to do with his fame that would make him a lot of money, and that only increases his fame. It's like a catch-22, like, I don't want this fame, but here, have more of it. So the Rotary Club in Nashville decides to honor him the best way they know how. He's a farmer. They decide they're going to buy him a farm. And they do. They collect donations from across the state of Tennessee. People donating to this cause to buy Alvin a farmhouse. And in 1922, they finished the house. Of course, that leads to a problem. You all have seen the movie. You know at the end of the movie what happens? See, I'll ask you, Judith, since you...
I don't remember.
It's been a long time since I've seen it.
You guys remember?
I didn't see it.
Oh, you did? You were hiding when I asked that question. Very, very clever, very sly. He comes back to the valley and the house is waiting for him, like immediately after the war. The first house he moves into when he comes back home was actually about half a mile across the Wolf River. His mom's house. He gets married, then he moves back into his mom's house. A great homecoming, right? Pretty typical though for a lot of families down here. You know, you'd live with your parents for a while you get established and build your own family, build your own home. And while this was being built for 3 years, he lived with his mother. They built a little alcove off to the side so Alvin and Gracie could have some space. But for the most part, they were living in that home. And they move in here in February 1922. And on that note, we're going to move into the house, literally and metaphorically, kind of following Alvin's footsteps. So y'all are welcome to go into the living room. And I will bring up the rear. Any questions while we're in here first off?
How tall was he?
That's a great question. Alvin was a giant of a man. He was 6'3".
Okay.
And when you see a photo, when we go into the entryway, you'll see he had giant hands. Like he was a man of big proportions. Indeed, when he left for the First World War, he weighed 165 pounds. So at 6'3", you know, he's a wiry fella, you know, a big scrapper. But by the time he comes back from the war, he weighed about 205 pounds. In fact, he was so ashamed of his of the weight that he put on while he was in the army, he would actually write back to his mom, Mary, and say, "I apologize for kind of being this decadent person." It wasn't because he was eating more than anyone else. It's because he finally had 3 square meals a day. You know, out here in the valley, you typically get, you know, 1 good hot meal and maybe a couple of cold meals. No, he was getting 3 square hot meals a day, so it was great for him. Any other questions before I tell you a bit about this space? So, I tell you the family moved into the house in 1922. Well, the Yorks come in and the house is finished. There was still a little bit of work going on. It wasn't quite done. The construction was a little off schedule. So the Yorks decided to make their original bedroom, master bedroom, down here in the living room. This was the original York bedroom. This was originally a sunroom, but they converted it into a bedroom for their purposes. Not a lot of privacy, right? Well, if the family wanted privacy, they would pull a curtain across the way, and that would tell the children that the parents were busy. And we know they were busy at least 10 times because they had 10 kids. There are 2 children remaining. About 7 of them survived adulthood, but the 2 children that are alive, still, we have Andrew Jackson York. He is 92 years old, and he lives just up the road. We also have Betsy Ross York. Yes, you are hearing that correctly. They had a lot of patriotically named family members. And she now lives in Bowling Green, Kentucky, and if I'm not mistaken, she's about 91, so not far behind Andrew York. But this space here, again, served as their bedroom for the whole time they were in the house. I say part of it was they didn't want to move upstairs when there was still a little bit of work going on. Another explanation is that they, again, having been born and raised in one-room cabins, wanted to be close to the source of heat for the home, which is right there. In fact, this source of heat, this fireplace, has an interesting story in the house. I'll let you know everything that you guys are looking at right now is original to the family. They owned it at one point or another, so some of it's original to 1922, some of it's original to 1964. The floorboards included. So these are some of the original floorboards of the house from the 1920s and the 1930s. These in specific are. Where you folks are standing over here, you may notice it's a little bit of a different color. That fireplace is to blame. You know, 10 kids, they like to get into some mischief. So one night, one of them was stoking the fire a little bit more than they should have, and some embers jump out onto the floorboards, and the house begins to catch fire. Alvin is not home. He is on a speaking engagement. Again, this is 1939, so World War II's looking like it's coming on the horizon. He's out giving talks and speeches. That was something that he did a lot of. He was paid for his time as a public speaker. And so it was up to Miss Gracie and the kids to put out the fire. But this is in the middle of December, right in the Wolf River Valley. They go down to the river to get water, and you can only imagine what they find. A bunch of frozen ice. So they're grabbing bucketfuls of snow to put out the fire. They manage to put it out, but they have to replace half of the floorboards in this room. And that's why this is a little bit lighter than that. The wallpaper was also something that had to be replaced. So this is original to about the 1930s, the 1940s. But the original 1920s wallpaper looked a lot like this. This nice colonial style number. Or as one visitor once related to me as being quite busy. I don't know, is that something anyone would want to put on their wall?
No.
Nah? Well, how about this? In the 1950s, they actually covered up these wooden floorboards with orange shag carpet.
Oh, really?
Yeah, normally that's the one people are like, And the last thing I'll point out in this house is in 1922, you think of Alvin York as being this Daniel Boone character who would prefer to live a very simple, non-technologically, complicated life, right? Those lighting fixtures on the wall, those are original to the house. All the electric lights that you see here are original to 1922. This was the first house that was electrified in the Wolf River Valley. So Alvin was a big proponent of technological, novelties and new stuff. In fact, all of these electric lights ran off of an electric generator, a kerosene generator, out in the back shed out there. They didn't have running water, though, and they wouldn't until the 1940s. So they were still making trips to the outhouse up until the 1940s. It was a nice one, though. It was a two-seater outhouse. So just imagine crawling through the snow, going out there to your outhouse. Any questions in this room, though, folks, while we're standing around?
Are these original too?
The drapes?
Drapes and everything?
At one point or another, yes, sir. I know some of the stuff in here, too. We've also done our best. If we have accounts for what a piece of wallpaper looked like, we would restore it. So if they're not the original drapes, they are certainly akin to something the Yorks definitely had. Any other questions? If not, we will move into the main entryway.
What was the hospital bed for?
That's an excellent question, ma'am. Normally I like to wrap up my tours with it, but that was okay.
To save it till the end.
I appreciate that. Oh, by the way, sir, that is the original family Bible if you want to get some footage of that. Noting the size of his mitts there?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Gracie wasn't a small woman either. She was about average for the time, so about 5'3", 5'4", which a lot of folks hear that and they think like, oh, that's average? Like, at the time, yeah. So Alvin was a giant by comparison out here in the valley. So, Alvin was a famous man, as we know, even if he tried to reject the fame. A lot of people heard about it, and they wanted to come visit the man. On average, the Yorks could expect 30 to 40 visitors a day. Yeah, can you just imagine that many people coming to your house? And they would greet each and every one of them here in this room. So this was probably the most public space in the whole house. And Alvin had it decorated like it was a public space, to kind of give you an idea of who he was as a person, his virtues, values, and experiences. So, prominently displayed up here on the wall, you would have his citation for the Medal of Honor. Kind of giving you an idea why he's famous. On the other side, you would have, oh goodness. Ma'am, can you read that for me, what it says up there on the wall?
It's French.
It is French.
Yeah, Croix de something, Greer. I don't know.
I like doing that to see how well people's French is. C'est la Croix de Guerre.
Oh.
That is the War Cross in French. That is the French equivalent of the Medal of Honor. The French gave Alvin their top award for valor in the military as well. In fact, the commander of all French forces during the First World War, a man named Ferdinand Foch, Field Marshal Ferdinand Foch, referred to Alvin York as the greatest private soldier of the entire war. Of a guy who was not a career soldier, as this conscript. But most importantly to Alvin, what you would find in the middle would be his wedding photo. That was taken only a few days after Alvin and Gracie got married in June of 1919. So here you're kind of getting an idea of his values and what's important to him. He might have also had his Medal of Honor up here on top of the piano. But we don't have those, so we can't show them to you. If you want to see the original Medal of Honor, you have to go to the State Museum in Nashville. They have possession of that, as well as some of Alvin's other personal belongings. Now, one of my favorite images in this whole house is right here above my head. Does anyone know who this is?
Lindbergh, that's all I can
Alvin?
That is not Alvin, ma'am. You got it right. That's Charles Lindbergh. Now, anyone reckon why he would have a picture of Charles Lindbergh up on the wall? Ain't because he liked him.
Fine.
Oh, it's not because he liked him.
They had a big public feud in the 1930s. So remember, World War II's on the horizon. By 1936, 37, a lot of people could see a war was coming. They didn't know when exactly or how it would turn out, but they knew that there was going to be a conflict. Germany was expanding, Japan was expanding, Italy was doing Italy things, so expanding, but not as well as the other two. And Alvin was a public proponent for getting involved in a war in Europe as soon as it happened. He was an interventionist, as they would say. If the Germans were doing nasty things, he wanted American boys over there taking care of business like they did during the First World War. And he went around on speaking tours promoting the idea. Charles Lindbergh, not so much. He had seen what had happened during the First World War and wanted no more part of it for the American people. He wanted no Americans in a potential war. So much so that he was actually a liaison on part of the Americans to the Germans during the 1930s. He would fly around with the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, and take their tactics and bring some of them back to the United States, trying to cultivate good relations with Germany. So much so that Germany's chancellor at the time, Adolf Hitler, gave him a medal. And York used that to his advantage. He would say to people, I have many medals, but none of them are condoned by Hitler. So there's a public feud in that way. Now I know what you're asking, why if he didn't like this guy would he have an image of him in his house? In the 1940s, remember, they got running water, so they finally had indoor bathrooms. They converted this closet into an indoor bathroom. And he hung Lindbergh's portrait above the bathroom. Yeah, that's the old-timey way of saying, a respected visitor in a certain part of my life.
Did he play the piano or was it Gracie?
I believe Gracie was mainly the piano player, but the family was pretty talented musically. Alvin was actually the leader of his choir at his church. So the Methodist church actually just across the river. In fact, if you guys go visit his gravesite, you will see the church that he used to go to. And I believe it is about 150, 170 years old now, so built in the mid-19th century. Any other questions in here, though, folks? Anything at all? If not, we're going to have to do the rotation into the study. So y'all in there are welcome to go on inside. It's a tight room. That's why I say rotation. Unless folks just want to, all cram yourselves in there like sardines in a can. I hope not.
Let's go.
Oh, yeah.
So while you're all in there, I'll narrate from out here. The study is an important room for Alvin because the man would tell you he only had a third grade education. He had only been formally schooled for about 9 months. We knew he knew how to read and write because, well, he read letters and sent letters home, so he obviously knew how to do that. But he never had the kind of schooling that you and I are accustomed to today. And that was a big deal for him because in being drafted, he went to New York where he shipped out for France. He was in France where he met people who spoke languages completely different from his own, who had different levels of education. So the study is kind of a metaphor for his big philanthropic mission after the war. He became a proponent of public education. So much so that he used his fame to raise money for a school here in Fentress County. One that was completed in 1927, the York Institute. And he ran that school personally, funded it out of his own pocket and with whatever loans and mortgages he could round up until 1937, when the money ran out and the state of Tennessee took control of the school for him. And they continue to run it to this day. York Institute is still a public high school in Fentress County. And the only school in the state of Tennessee run by the state of Tennessee rather than by the city or the county. So a big old note there. But while you're in there, you might have also seen Alvin's parents on the wall across the way. Those two stern-looking folks right back there. That is, I kid you not, William and Mary York. A lot of people hear those names and are like, oh, is this college in Virginia named after them? No. It's a weird coincidence. William was a blacksmith, a very skilled blacksmith. In fact, he set up his shop in a cave right across the Wolf River. And he was always working as a blacksmith. Indeed, he died doing his job as a blacksmith. He was shoeing a mule, and the mule apparently didn't like what he was doing and kicked him in the chest. Now, of course, there's a lot of complications from that. You know, he might have crushed his windpipe, might have collapsed a lung. Whatever it was, it killed him a few days later and left Mary to raise 11 kids all by her lonesome, one of them including Alvin, who was the third oldest. Well, in the wake of his father's passing, Alvin took to smoking, drinking, fighting, cussing, or as I like to call it, Saturday night for me. Don't worry, it's not that bad. But he went around rabble-rousing throughout the valley, and with one of his friends in 1914, went up to one of the Wild Tiger bars, as they were called, up on the Tennessee-Kentucky line. These were bars that literally sat on the state line. Tennessee at this point was pretty much a dry state. You couldn't drink alcohol there. So on these bars, if the police showed up on the Tennessee side, you could go over to the Kentucky side, where it was legal to drink alcohol. He got into a bar fight at one of these bars, or at that bar in 1914, and his friend who was with him was killed in the bar brawl. That really shook up Alvin and got him on the path to reconverting, becoming a good Christian again. But the real kicker, I like to think, was the way that his mother addressed it. Said, "When are you going to become a man like your father?" You know, if my mom told me that, you best believe I would clean up my act. Like, oh no, I don't want to disappoint mom. Well, on a revival in 1915, Alvin is rebaptized as a Methodist in the old tradition. Becomes a very devout man. Gets a job crushing gravel for 127 out here. So he helped build the highway on which his house sits. And again, you know the story. 1917, registers as a conscientious objector, but doesn't work, and he is forced to become a famous soldier. Any questions, though, while we're down here, folks? In the study, perhaps you might have seen something. Anything in there that struck your eye, or are you all ready to move on upstairs? If not...
I see there's a thing, a little statue of a dog. Do they have a dog? A pug? It looks like a pug.
So it's funny.
Is that just a joke that they have in there? Or?
It's a weird story with the dog. Apparently they just had that to have that. I'm not as familiar with the York's pets as I probably should be. Although I imagine they had dogs running around. Gracie actually treated it as a hat rack.
Oh, okay.
So if you had a hat came in, you could put it on that little dog statue. We know this because one of the professors who wrote many an article on Alvin York actually came in, had a hat, and Gracie said, "Here, put your hat on the dog." He's like, "Okay, fair enough. I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to do." Any other questions, folks? No.
So you're saying that statue was one of their statues as an actual furniture piece for them?
Yes, sir. That is exactly what I'm saying. I'm glad you can say it more concisely than me. All right, so follow me, folks, and we'll head on upstairs. Please do be careful as you maneuver up the steps.
You really meant up there, didn't you?
Yes, ma'am. I'm a man of my word.
It's a pretty wide set of stairs.
To a room or something?
There's time, absolutely. And feel free to take a peek through all these rooms while you're up here.
All the plumbing.
Yes, sir. Remember, they didn't get that running water till the 1940s, so originally that was a bedroom. But they converted it into a full bath in the 1940s. Yes, sir. I'm assuming by this point they were done bathing in the Wolf River. It's like we just want a big old tub. Oh, goodness. So to give you a little context for the upstairs, normally the second floor of a house like this would be a purely private space, a space reserved purely for the family. This was a space that, visitors would almost never see. However, you may notice by now the Yorks did not have a private life. They were public people through and through, public citizens. 30 to 40 people visiting them per day. The nearest hotel might be in Jamestown, but at the time, doubtful. They needed a place to stay if they were visiting the Yorks, and oftentimes they have hosted visitors up here. So, you had the 10 kids up here. You had visitors up here. When the kids got married, you know, they would come back and live in some of these rooms too. So this was a very crowded place. But one of my favorite thoughts about this, you know, imagine like the little kids running around, the kids of Alvin York, and imagine their childhood with all these people around. No private time to themselves. Not a normal childhood.
No.
Not at all. And I asked one young man once about what he thought about that. I was like, would you rather have all those siblings or all these visitors? And he said, I'd rather the visitors because at least visitors leave at some point. But yeah, so in that room there, I know we had Mary Frances York, one of Alvin's daughters, living in there with her husband, Joe Franklin.
Is that who's in the picture?
Yes, ma'am. So you had them in there. Let's see. Yeah, I believe in this room you also had Miss Kansas, one of Gracie's sisters, living here as well. So extended family in addition to the family of Alvin more directly. I believe you had about 3 girls out
There
of
was like 3 rooms, looked like 3 girls.
I could see that. I need to double check specifically who lived in which room. This is my second week on the job, so the details are still coming, so I apologize for that. By the way, in case y'all are curious about what Alvin's birth pattern looked like, you actually have it on the photo, or on the wall in a photo, on the bottom. That was where he was born. That was the log cabin where he lived before we moved into this house. And it was torn down, I believe, sometime about the 1940s, when that land was traded. Speaking of land, by the way, the Yorks took height of about 900 acres of land out here. So they were the major property for that area. And they didn't accumulate it all at once. They bought it over decades up until the 1960s when Alvin passed away. Any questions up here, though, folks? You've seen a lot of rooms.
What was the name of the son that used to be the curator?
That would be Andrew Jackson York. He was the first manager of this state park. You know, they kept it in the family. Really, truly kept it in the family. Is that who you're looking for?
Came here about 6-7 years ago, and he was a curator.
I believe he retired in 2011, so it might have been a little bit longer than that, sir. Or it might have
Well,
been.
it was.
No, it was him. He was here, but I think it was a little longer than that.
He was here, and he had all kinds of stories about his father.
That he did. Or does. I don't know why I say did. He is still very much alive. He doesn't come around much as much anymore, unfortunately. But do you have any good stories from when you were talking to Andrew there, George?
Don't remember.
Don't remember?
Old age takes its toll. I only got one light brain cell left.
It's fighting the Alamo, right?
Were you?
So there's just 2 bathrooms for all these people in this house.
Yes, ma'am.
That had to be.
It required some shuffling, absolutely. But, and again, remember, before the 1940s, there were no bathrooms. You had bedrooms and you had the closet downstairs. But it was also nice because half of this bedroom here was converted into a closet when they converted that half into a bathroom. So you had, like, when that closet was removed, you had this space up here. And you also had behind that curtain a kind of closet space. They used that as a place to store objects, whatever they needed. All the clothes were stored in dressers pretty much, as was the custom of the 19th century. And if you ask me, it probably stems from the old tradition of using dressers and not building closets because closets counted as rooms. And back in the day, you taxed houses based on how many rooms they had. So use dressers, not closets. Old little tidbit. But if there are no other questions up here.
I do remember a story.
Yes.
He elaborated on what a crack shot his father was. Even later in his years, they would move him out of that bed downstairs and put him out on the porch. And with pistol or rifle, he could still, with a single shot, pick the birds off the eaves of the barn.
I could believe that. I believe that 100%. The man was a crack shot. He was always winning turkey shoots in the valley in the 1910s and 1900s. So much so that it kind of startled the other locals. And those guys are crack shots too. Like everyone in this valley was a crack shot, but Alvin was a step above the rest. Any other questions, folks, or stories? I take both. If not, we'll proceed back downstairs. I'm sorry for you folks who had to come up the stairs as we proceed to go down. We'll head into the kitchen.
And you guys want to walk in this one? No? I was going to check out this.
Be careful with these last few steps. They're a little bit different than the main steps. And for good reason. They were added to the house a little bit later in the 1930s.
These stairs,
Yes, ma'am.
they're not even, that's why.
Exactly.
Some short, some large.
Well, those steps were specifically commissioned by Gracie.
Oh, okay.
She, so before this was just a wall. You had no doorway up to that second floor.
Okay.
Gracie requested it because she wanted to be able to basically make loops around the house, since she was greeting guests, serving meals, and cooking those meals here in this room. So remember, 30 to 40 people visiting the Yorks per day on average. The Yorks had a policy where if you were here and you were in range of the dinner bell, you were entitled to a good hot meal on their behalf. So they were cooking for a lot of people every day.
All the time.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Hot in here too.
This is all the candy.
Hot and crowded. Because Gracie actually hired some local girls to help her do the dishes and cooking and that sort of thing. So hot, crowded, they're cooking up messes of pinto beans and cornbread, things that are easy to cook. And in fact, we have it on record that they have gone through many bags, multiple bags of 50-pound bags of pinto beans in a week, multiple bags of pinto beans. So they're running through that stuff, providing meals for whoever needed it as they were coming through. All of the furniture in here is pretty original, except for the stove. This is not their original stove. This is a replica of what that stove would have looked like. It's still an antique, but not the same one they had. And we know that the stove was here because if you look at the floor, you will see the scorch marks. They got rid of their original stove in the 1950s when they finally got their hands on an avocado green electric stove and matching refrigerator. So that wonderful, puke green looking color from the 50s. So they had that, but the rest of it is pretty original, including your water table here. It'll be great for rolling out pastry. You can just feel that cool stone on the top. And does anyone know what that kind of cabinet is called back there?
Hoosier cabinet.
My God, you guys are smart. You said it, not me, ma'am. But yeah, you had your Hoosier cabinet here. I absolutely love this model. With the built-in flour dispenser and sifter at the bottom. Back in the day when making bread and pastry required you to sift your flour for whatever you were doing before the mechanized processes that we have today. But I also love this pie chest right behind y'all. Careful, sir. This pie chest is probably one of the oldest pieces in the house. And we know because we have photographic evidence. In February 1922, when they were moving into this house, they were taking photos, and we see that pie chest in the photos. That is an original family piece, if ever there was one. So I'd wager, just over a century old at least. And we have it lined up as...
It's 100 years old, this house. I just now put that together.
You guys timed your visit perfectly.
Yeah.
Coming in on the 100th anniversary of moving into the house. In fact, we had a big old event back in February where we were in the middle of the snow, the Tennessee winter, where it actually snowed for once. Kind of having a big old party here in honor of the Yorks in the beginning of our story. But we have the pie cupboard, pie chest laid out as it would have been, with produce on the top, preserves in the middle, concentrates in the middle, and mason jars on the bottom. And those mason jars would have come in handy in the canning house out back. You all saw that stone house out in the back around the garden. That was their canning house. So they might have their molasses stored in there, their jams, all sorts of things. And the last thing I'll point out in this house is one thing that y'all might have a little trouble knowing. This is not a usual thing, but on the door, on the upper left-hand corner.
Locks.
Those aren't locks.
The clothes
They're
pants?
silverware.
You get bonus points. Those are knives. Those are butter knives. So remember, Alvin traveled a lot on speaking engagements and that sort of thing.
Oh, that's an alarm.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's the alarm system. So if someone tried to open the door,
Oh, is that what happened?
yeah, they would rattle or they would fall. Gracie didn't use butter knives. She used actual steak knives. So you gotta have something there to, greet the person trying to get in. But again, when Alvin's gone, Gracie had to think about her kids, protect her kids. So she used that kind of security system if something were to happen. And to bring Charles Lindbergh back into it, remember in the 1930s, the case of the Lindbergh baby?
Kidnapper, yeah.
That was a real legitimate fear at the time. Especially when you're famous
So
enough
they
to
didn't
have
want the
10
kids to get into the pantry? Is that the idea of having them up there?
Well, that's actually not the pantry. That's a way out of the house as well. It leads to the root cellar where there's also a door into it. So,
Okay.
but this is a pantry right over here. This also kind of served as pantry space, and right next to it we have the original can opener. A lot of people laugh that it's built into the wall. I'll admit, first time I worked in this house, I thought, that's a pencil sharpener. I don't know why they need a pencil sharpener, but they have one. Any questions in here, folks?
In the time period, were there a lot of people stealing stuff from people, like other farmers or anything like that?
Down here in the valley, that's a great question. I think the crime rate was pretty low, but I don't have any stats to back that up. That is just pure conjecture on my part, Sarah.
I know in Texas, a lot of those like rural towns, they have like marauders or whatever that go around.
During the Civil War, that was a big issue. This county was pretty much split 50-50 between Unionists and Confederates. And I'd imagine a lot of those tensions between families existed into the 1920s and 30s. So it wouldn't be unusual, but in Pall Mall in 1960, for instance, there were only about 300 people here. So if you steal something from your neighbor, they're probably going to know you did it. There's only so many people they can ask. If there's no other questions in here, folks, we'll move on into the dining room.
Yes, it is.
Bonus points. No one ever knows what that is.
My mom has one.
Yeah, I have that very similar Hoosier to that. That's now Kevin's.
Never used it, but we have one. Yeah.
We fixed it up a little bit and I handed it over to Kevin.
Well, I like that one in particular because it's from Germany. It has that German writing on it, the Mäuseturm, the Drachenfels, all these different castles and whatnot. And I imagine that was something that Mary Frances brought back with her because her husband, Joe Franklin, was actually stationed in Germany for a bit. Indeed, that cuckoo clock in the living room was something they offered. So welcome to the dining room, folks. Remember I told you the policy was if you were in range of the dinner bell, you were invited to whatever meal it was. Yeah. Do you think you can fit 30 to 40 people in here at a time? Certainly not comfortably. What they would do is they would eat in shifts. So you'd have about 8 or 10 people in the dining room at any one time, munching on their beans and cornbread. The table was changed over the years. Originally, they had a longer rectangular number that sat diagonally in the living room, or in the dining room. My apologies. But they felt it was a little, cramped in here with that number. So they got this table here. They could also expand out. You could put boards in the middle that would make it a longer table or a shorter table, depending on what you needed.
Look, the cast iron is just like mine.
Gotta love the exploration.
Would that be a fish they caught in the Wolf River?
You could catch it in the Wolf River. Bonus points if you know what kind of fish it is.
The
gonna
needle
ask.
nose something or another.
What'd you say about it?
I was gonna ask what it
Oh,
was.
okay. That's an alligator gar. So needle nose, not far.
Fish, yes.
But you can catch that in the Wolf River. That one was not. Alvin was very fond of antiquing. He likes to antique. And that was something that he got on one of his escapades to the antique shop. Story goes that he looked at it, he liked it, he bought it, brought it back here to the house, and hanged it right up there in the dining room. You can only imagine what Gracie thought when she saw that in her dining room. Probably said something along the lines of, "What the hell is that hideous thing?" Well, for all we can tell, Alvin won that argument because the fish stayed and kind of became like a family joke here. Any other questions about any of the furniture here in the dining room? Anything at all? No.
The built-in unit original?
Yes, sir. That's one of the more unique pieces of the house, because again, you don't see that everywhere. I know one of the stories I like to tell about that piece in particular is when Gracie was cooking her bread, baking her bread, she would cool it in the bottom drawer there. She would just leave it there. Now remember, 30 to 40 people in here, crowded dining room as they're rotating the people through for their meals. The kids got mighty hungry, and they discovered that Gracie would leave bread in there, so they would, pick and nibble at it. But you can imagine at some point, Gracie found out what they were doing, probably pretty quickly. Yet she left bread in there anyway. I think that was, a good way to provide a snack for the kids. Turned into that at some point. Anything else, folks? Because if not, we'll conclude our story back where we started in the living room. Yes, ma'am.
Let me look at this just for a minute. I think it's like granite.
So the last piece I'll show here for y'all before turning y'all loose back to the elements is something that y'all have already seen and asked a question about, but I like saving it for the end because it's a nice little bookmark for the end of Alvin's story. It's that hospital bed right there. That is a Cirque electric bed from the Stryker Corporation. It is one of the first electric hospital beds ever constructed in the United States. And indeed, that is a prototype model. That is one.
Stryker?
Yes, sir.
Oh.
Indeed, that is actually one of 3 original prototype Strykers made by the corporation. And Alvin was a friend of the president, so when Alvin had his stroke in 1954, I believe it was, it was going to happen that he was going to get this bed. And for Alvin, when he had that stroke, it paralyzed his body from the left side down. So he lost a lot of mobility, and for the next 10 years, he was in just failing health. A lot of his vital signs were out of whack, and again, he couldn't move that other left side of his body. So the bed kind of became a solace for him and a source of humor as much as he could, given the state of things. That bed, believe it or not, can rotate a full 360 degrees around. Not like you would want to do that in the bed, but you could. Alvin called it his Ferris wheel bed for that reason. And indeed, he liked to take his grandkids on rides on the thing. They just thought it was the darndest thing. And you can tell they did that a lot because if you look at the wallpaper,
That's all scarred up.
it's all scarred up.
How about this little, is this somebody made wheelchair, or was that a authentic?
I do not know, ma'am. I need to get you an answer.
That's okay.
Is that a blood pressure cuff and that?
Yes, ma'am. Kind of different from the ones we have today.
Yeah.
That you might find at the doctor's office. That bed, though, would serve as Alvin's last bed in this house. In August of 1964, he slipped into a coma when he was taken to Nashville for medical treatment for his ailing health. And he never woke back up. He passed away that year at the age of 76. And it was a big, big deal around here. Remember, as I told you, in the 1960s, the census says that there were about 300 people here in Pall Mall, and between you and me and whoever else will be listening, I think that's an overshoot. I think there were fewer people in Pall Mall at the time. The census counter probably counted someone twice. Thousands of people turned out for Alvin's funeral here in the Valley, including representatives from the United States government, from the French government, from the Italian government, and even the German government. Mm-hmm. Those people that he was shooting at across the sea back in World War I, yeah, they even sent someone over here. And Gracie, being all alone now, had to reconcile with what to do with the house. Again, it was funded by the state of Tennessee, literally the people of Tennessee, you, me, and everybody else. And so what she wanted to do was kind of preserve the legacy as best she could without saddling it directly on top of the kids. So she decided that over time, bits and pieces of this would be given back to the state. In 1967, the state got the grist mill just across the way. And that was the beginnings of Alvin York State Historic Park. That was the visitor center for the longest time. The house entered into the state in the 1980s, after 1984 actually, when Gracie passed away. So we've been stewards for the place for almost going on close to 70 years now, or actually closer to 60 if I do my math correctly. I'm a historian, not a mathematician. Don't quote me on these kinds of things. But we've been looking over it, and as you guys heard, one of the first managers of this park was Andrew Jackson York, Alvin's direct son. So the family has still been very much involved in the running of this place and the preservation of Alvin's legacy. And you knew him before as a one-dimensional hero, this guy who did something incredible during the First World War, but you got to look into his personal life here going through the house. You know, he has quirks and idiosyncrasies, a lot like you and I have. Things that make you tick, things that make you comfortable. You know him a little bit better, and I think a little bit more detail than you get from the movie. And it is on that note that I will conclude my tour. Thank you so much for coming with me on this adventure. I appreciate it. Y'all have been absolutely lovely, so give yourselves a pat on the back for it as well. But I'll be hanging out for a little bit. If you guys have any questions, please do let me know. I will answer them to the best of my abilities or come up with a story if I can't think of something.
I have a question. Did they award him his GED since he didn't graduate?
That is a good question. I do not know, ma'am.
Okay, just saw they gave him an honorary diploma.
I wouldn't be surprised if they did. I know the York family, Alvin's sons and daughters, actually would attend the graduations taking place at the York Institute. It was kind of a ritual, a good little boost for the graduates of the Institute. But whether or not they gave him an honorary GED, good question.
2003 is the date he got it.
Yeah, it says honorary diploma award.
Yeah.
So what? I don't know what
He
that
didn't know
would be.
he had it.
Is that a diploma or just?
I mean, maybe the only doctorate from the York Institute.
Yeah, whatever.
But I will double check on that, ma'am.
Okay, that's okay.
Did you go to York Institute?
No, ma'am, I am not from this valley.
Oh, okay. All right.
I'm actually from around Knoxville. I'm from Norris, Tennessee, if you guys are
Oh, we
familiar.
know Norris. Yes, we do.
Yeah, that is-
Monada.
Oh, yeah, you guys know. That's actually on the way back that way. I pass Oneida every day. So that's home for me, but I have a deep respect for this place. We actually, at Norris Middle School, would come out here on field trips. So we,
Yeah, all the schools.
We
back
do too.
when Andrew was the manager, so that was a lot of fun.
And one other question, are these Gracie's clothes?
Yes, ma'am. Like I said, for all I can tell, the only piece in this house that is not original is that oven back there, that range that they had back there. Because again, it's only because they took the other one out and it rusted away.
Okay.
We found it, but it was beyond saving.
Okay.
It just kind of went into the scrap heap at that point. Any other questions, folks? If not, you're welcome. Yes, sir.
Not a question, just elaborate on that shooting scenario that his son talked about. His father was ambidextrous, but he was primarily right-hand dominant. So after he had his stroke, they would periodically move him out of there and put him out on the porch because it wasn't enclosed in at the time, and he would just wait with a pistol and they'd give him a support if you wanted to use a long gun, and he would just pick the pigeons and whatever landed on the eaves of the roof off. Right up to the end, he was a shooter.
I love that story. Like, because you could just see him doing it. You know, it's one of those things.
It was one of the few pleasures his son had that he had left,
Yeah.
that he could still function and do, and that's how it all started for him with a rifle.
So kind of, yeah, good. Finding whatever comfort you can. You're right, sir. And I love that story, and I'm going to have to start including that in my tours. In case y'all didn't know, by the way, I was telling it to some of y'all, but this is my second week on the job, so I'm still getting some of the details down.
You
So,
did a good
You've
job.
done a great
I had
job.
no idea.
well, thank
Seemed
you.
like an old pro.
Old, maybe, pro, no. Any other questions, folks? If not, we can step outside the house, and I'll still answer them there for you, be it about the house, Alvin's life, or context around it. I got answers for you.
Yeah.
Oh, God, I'm gonna get over this cough. You know how that cough makes you be susceptible to more coughing now?
Yes.
So I had 3 more attacks.
Oh, yeah, I was already thinking it as soon as I looked at it.
Well, we just concluded the tour there, and I'm on the outside, and the young man's just been here 2 weeks and did an excellent job on giving the tour. Not for sure how he learned that much no longer than he's been here, but we've been here before and filmed across the street. We filmed the Alvin York mill, grist mill. You can't see it, but it's on the other side of the road right there. This is the Wolf River that runs through here. That video is only 3 or 4 minutes of the grist mill. You can find that in my videos. This would have been the York farm, and the young man told us in there, I believe at one point, that the Yorks owned about 900 acres here, and started the York Institute. That's still a school to this day that's run by the state of Tennessee, which is very unusual. So I just wanted to walk around the property here just a little bit and let you see some of the structures and different outbuildings. These are your typical Appalachian buildings that you would see made out of wood like this, but you don't generally see so many of them made out of the stone. They've got a little garden out here. There's the back of the house. So we're going to get ready to conclude the tour here in just a minute, but I wanted to show you the outside, and there's a lot more here to see. If you're ever in this area, make sure to come here and take the tour and check it out. Go over and see the grist mill. We're going up to the Ferris General Store to film that. So also the rugby area is a place, if you come here within about 30 minutes, you can hit Rugby, Historic Rugby Village, the R.M. Brooks store. You can hit the Alvin York farm here. This is a Tennessee State Park, and you can come here and check out everything that you are seeing on the video. I see some people going over this way to the barn. Not for sure if that's accessible or not, but we've got something set up there. Across the street is where we checked in at. That's the Alvin York General Store. There was a general store there apparently that Alvin ran. So let's look at that there. Zoom in a little bit. That's where we were parked. They have a area here with restrooms. That's nice. We would stay a little bit longer, but this video is going to come to an end in just a few seconds because we need to get on up the road. I see a house across the street here that I have not got information on. I'm not for sure what that's doing over there, but get the side picture of the house here. They had a lot of windows on the porch there, and there's Jody walking around. It's just absolutely beautiful here. I think the tour was $5 a piece, and we're getting ready to take off and head on up to the Ferris General Store. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like the video. Make sure to leave a comment. If you've ever been here, leave a comment, and we'll see y'all next time. Bye-bye.